Well, I'm back. You can go ahead. WMAs, this ought to be interesting.
All right, I'm going to ask Chuck, if he will, before we go to WMAs, I'm going to give commissioners, the Wildlife Committee, the opportunity to ask him any questions or something that might not have come up that they've got a question about. So if any members of the Wildlife Committee have got any questions for Chuck or comments, I'm going to open the floor up right now. Commissioner Box.
Thank you, Commissioner Holbert. Chuck, what are, would they consider the agency, or at least maybe take a look at this and get back with us in May on doing a week-long, maybe early archery velvet hunt? Just maybe look at that just to consider it.
Yes, ma'am. I will share with you that during the public comment period, we received a comment in that regard, and we did explore that as an agency, that it didn't seem to be a lot of passion behind having such a hunt. We can certainly revisit that between now and May. I would maybe encourage more specifics as far as the requests, whether it would be limited to antler deer or include antlerless as well. So those are some of the factors, I guess.
It'd be antler only.
Antlered only?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Chuck, there's been some discussion, I know we've discussed it a couple years in a row, but on the the raccoon season starting in July, I don't have the exact date with me. Would it be, or I'd like to ask the agency to check into it. It seems to be West Tennessee, Middle Tennessee definitely supports it, but I know there's some areas of far east Tennessee that are really concerned about it. So just ask the agency to visit that and see if maybe there's a dividing line. We can do it, see if you could do it county specific or maybe the interstates. See if that's a possibility, or you may have already discussed that. I don't know.
Well, I'm going to invite Roger Applegate up for a brief moment to share just a little bit of content on that, just as a precursor to saying that we can certainly think more about that between now and May. Roger.
Thank you. That was too loud, wasn't it? I better stand back here. So to your question, and as Chuck said, this was just comments precursor to our going out and basically discussing this among our staff and seeing what the possibilities are. But one of the things I want to mention is that East Tennessee has had historically low raccoon populations compared to the rest of the state, and there's a couple of factors. One of those is a very long-standing factor that there are so many blocks of fairly extensive forest in East Tennessee that really are not highly supportive of raccoons. A lot of people think of raccoons in forests, but that's not really true. It's raccoons in relatively open country. And so that as a whole kind of limits the numbers that you will find relative to other parts of the state where you have a lot more farmland and so forth interspersed. The other factor is that East Tennessee, a fairly large part of East Tennessee that corresponds roughly with the Region 4 area, so just a little bit to the west of that, but most of, really all of Region 4 and in parts of Region 3 are within an area where raccoon rabies has become pretty much established since sometime in the 1980s. And that raccoon rabies area is maintained because there are fair numbers of raccoons living in that terrain. And so the raccoon rabies would kind of go away. It would fizzle out if raccoon numbers were really extremely low. So those are just some points to think about, and those are things that we'll think about in terms of our, analyzing that situation and then figuring out where there might be a relatively logical boundary.
Okay.
So,
thank you, Rod.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
One other thing, Chuck. Some emails questioning, or at least the agency look at making it legal to harvest a bobcat during muzzleloader season. I think currently begins later, first weekend of gun season. But anyway, you have an opinion on that, or if y'all could look into it, one or the other.
Yes, similar to the archery antlered, archery velvet antlered season. That was one that we also discussed in the March season setting meetings. Again, not a whole lot of passion for that change. One point is to think about as a commission is that doing so would be inconsistent with the opener of the other fur bearer seasons. Not that that's necessarily a problem, but it's something to certainly be aware of. And we will make sure that that's another item that we explore more between now and May.
Okay. Mr. Cox.
I almost forgot about this till you opened it back up and reminded me. And I've talked about this with several people, but we have alligators in West Tennessee, southwest Tennessee, which has been widely known. And I would like to know if it's going to be, and you may or may not have talked about this, but I'd like to know if it's going to be the agency's position to promote a breeding population of alligators in Tennessee, since it is, as far as I know, it's non-native and it's invasive. Why would we want a top predator breeding population in Tennessee? Now, it may be something federal guidelines, Director Carter, you said that might be protected. Lord knows why. There's so many of them now. But anyway, I'd like to know what, and not now, but I'd like to know what the agency's position is going to be on that, because I don't particularly want to. We've got the Wolf River runs through the town I live in, and there are boardwalks and parks that butt up, and houses that they've filled in and built in close proximity to the river. And I really don't think people in Tennessee or Southwest Tennessee want a population of alligators to contend with, eating their dogs and, heaven forbid, their children. So, and you know, it sounds like a joke, but I'm not kidding. What are we going to do about this invasive animal? Sometime maybe May you might talk about that.
Yes, sir.
Please, if
Yes,
it
sir.
suits.
All right. Continue on, Chuck.
All right, very good. So now we'll transition into the recommendations for the wildlife management areas, public hunting areas, and refuges. And you're now going to hear from the respective regional wildlife program managers for those regions. And then following that, we'll have Joy Sweeney, and then I'll come back up and wrap things up. So I believe we have Jim Hamilton up first, the Region 1 Wildlife Program Manager.
Jim, you're going to have to tell us the whole story.
On what?
Why you're in a coat and tie. We know you, but there's got to be, there's more to this story. But anyway.
I wore this when my daughter got married.
That's what I heard. So.
Chuck, I'll give it to you. If your daughter gets married, you can have it. It'll be in style then. Okay. In Region 1, West Tennessee, we have changes to two different WMAs, basically. Let's see if we can do this. There we go. President's Island WMA and Horns Bluff Refuge. On President's Island, we propose to remove the quota, the 3-day antlerless 150 quota hunt, and the 3-day antlerless the buck hunt. I'll just refer to it as a buck hunt. A 50 quota. We'll get rid of both those hunts and replace them with 2 3-day antlered quota hunts of 30 apiece for each hunt. We'll have the first one in October, which will be when the traditional antlers hunt was, and the second one will be in December when the buck hunt normally is. And it'll add 10 extra permits, an opportunity for 10 extra people to hunt on the buck hunt. Along with that, we also propose an either-or, where it's supposed to be 9-point or better for the buck. We're proposing an outside spread or an outside spread of 22 inches. And this will also include Moss Island, John Tully, and Ernest Rice WMAs where it's 9-point or better rule too. While I'm on President's Island, before I go to Horns Bluff, any questions or anything?
Yeah, I've got one. Why do you use an outside spread? Don't you usually use an inside? What would that compute to inside spread, you think?
About 19 and a half. And the reason we went with outside spread is to be consistent with Catoosa, Laurel Hill, and Cheatham.
Do you know how many bucks over the years have fallen within the 22 inch? How many 22 inch outside have you killed? Any?
Yes, there would be some. Yes, there would be. And this is to allow, the 22 inch outside is to allow those great big 8 points to be taken. You know, most hunters, they can count to 9 and they can see that it's not 9 point, that'll be 9 points and that'll be legal. So, but if they see that great big eight point that I have heard is out there, and Daniel is going to be putting some cameras out there to check and see what we've got, and that'll allow those to be taken if they're 8 point.
Since this is such a special hunt, can you give us just a quick rundown on how the levee breach and the river going in there in 2011, what's that done to the population and to the ag part of that island?
The ag has been cut down by about 25%, Daniel, about 20%. And I know Dr. Kennedy flew after a post-flood, did a thermal imaging, and the population of deer was down 40%. But they've killed, last year they killed 10 last year, and they're still killing some pretty nice deer, but they are killing, some of them are smaller. The 2.5-year-olds are smaller, but they still had 9 points, so they were legal.
Any other questions on President's Island?
Sorry.
Jim, I would like to, before you move off, and I will mention this, and Jim's already said that there's a regulation in some of those that allow for a spike to be killed, but I think that's going to get.
Yes, that was an oversight when we changed it.
Oversight. So some of you might notice that in your red line version. But I'd like the agency to ask you to at least consider an 18-inch spread on that. You come back in May. Inside spread. Any other questions on President's Island? Go ahead.
On Horns Bluff, we're going to open the goose season to include the conservation light goose season.
Any questions? Horns Bluff, part of it's open and part of it's not, right,
Correct,
Jim?
correct.
Okay.
The triangle on the north side of the levee of the canal is open to hunting on weekends during duck season. It's just the weekends and then it's closed during the week. And the main refuge part is a swamp on the south side. A lot of ducks use that.
Is it? I didn't even know coming up, but is it? I know hunter participation seems to be growing there on ducks. You think we'll ever have to draw there, or is it getting to that point yet?
I don't think so. It's mainly walk-in. So it's mainly kids and people that are younger than I am that are walking all the way and carrying their decoys in and hunting. So it's mainly, and there are a lot of people that hunt on the outskirts of it that have hunting clubs. So, I mean, it's not, that part is really not functioning as a refuge like the south side is.
Right.
We're just providing opportunity for some people to want to walk in to hunt.
Okay. Any other questions for Jim? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Commissioners, my name is Richard Kirk. I'm the Region 2 Wildlife Program Manager. And today I'm going to offer recommendations on 2 WMAs in Region 2, Cheatham WMA and Cedar Hill Swamp. If you remember back last fall, Eric Tummins, who is the Cheatham WMA manager, spoke to the commission and provided some information of the role that Cheatham WMA played in the restoration of deer in Tennessee. And through the 1990s and early 2000s, Cheatham WMA was the go-to WMA in Middle Tennessee. It drew people from all across the state. It drew people from other states around Tennessee. But in 2007, we had a dramatic impact with an EHD outbreak. And it really sent the deer herd in a spiral down. I mean, I had guys that had drove the area back then telling me you could drive the roads and smell the deer in the woods. So, and it was a significant die-off. Since then, in the succeeding 10 years, we believe the deer herd's come back. So Eric and the guys this past end of January, early February, conducted thermal imaging surveys and used that data and did the math and came up with a population estimate. And now we believe that we have around 2,000 deer on Cheatham, on 21,000 acres. And you can see from the graph here, the harvest in about 2007 is down considerably. We believe hunters at that point left Cheatham and found somewhere else to hunt. The deer herd has come back, but the hunters have not. They found somewhere else to hunt. To try to describe that better, this past season, during the season, Eric conducted vehicle counts on Cheatham, primarily on Saturdays or Sundays and a couple of weekdays, but 11 times he drove the area and counted vehicles on that 21,000 acres. And we averaged about 16 vehicles on 21,000 acres. That tells us that participation is low. So our recommendations that we're going to offer today are incentives, or recommendations we hope to give hunters that incentive to come back to Cheatham and give Cheatham another try, because if we can get them back there, I think we can keep them. But let me preface this. Our objective here is to bring hunters back to Cheatham. We're going to continue to monitor the deer herd. We're going to continue to monitor participation and harvest. And in 2 years, if we very well come back and offer more changes. So this is just I don't want to use the word experiment, but we're trying to pull those hunters back. And we're doing that in three ways. The first way is we want to reinstate Cheatham into the quota hunt system. Right now it's open same as statewide, and we're not getting the participation. If we reinstate it back into the quota hunt system, we believe we're making that hunt permit special again. That hunters that draw that permit will make every effort to show up and hunt that weekend. We're also wanting to offer these hunts earlier than the statewide openings. And let me just go ahead and go to it here. You can see the archery hunt, it's non-quota, but it's before the statewide archery season. And it's one deer either sex. The young sportsman's hunt is a 3-day hunt that's before the statewide sportsman's hunt, youth sportsman's hunt. 2 muzzleloader hunts before the statewide muzzleloader openings. And then 3 gun hunts, one of those being earlier than the opening of statewide gun. And one of those would be either sex. Now the third leg to this table, I guess you could say, or take this stool, is we want to implement some antler restrictions. We want to implement 4 on one side or a 15-inch spread. Our age data is showing that these 8-point deer are showing up at 2.5 years old. So by putting 4 on one side, granted we'll get some 7s, but we're protecting those 1.5-year-old deer. So I guess I'm done there if you've got any questions.
Anybody got any questions on Cheatham?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, I think you got a great idea, but why would you only limit it to 3 days? Why wouldn't you give, since you're having several of them and you're, limiting it and you're earlier, why don't you give the hunters that get drawn a week? You've got plenty of time. I mean, you close, the last one's December the 9th. The season's open for another month.
And we do have, no, that's not it.
3 days is just not
Right
much,
here.
not much time.
We do offer a Monday through Friday hunt right here for those hunters that do work on weekends and it's not available. We can certainly, I'll go back and talk with Russ and Eric, and we'll certainly talk about that.
Or the 30th through 2nd, is that not a weekend?
It is, yes, it is.
Yeah.
But also in here that's, and I'd have to look at the dates, but in that gap there between December 2nd and, November 2nd and November 30th, we have a 13-day quota turkey hunt. And also, we didn't want to compete with opening day of gun season or the week or turkey or Thanksgiving weekend or the opening weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our logic.
I get that, but you got a 30th through the 2nd. I can't see why you couldn't run that for a week and then come back. I don't know why you don't have another one toward the end of December or 2. But anyway, it just seemed like 3 days is a short time. Just a comment. I think you're on the right track. I think it'd be great to do that, to try to get the interest back, but I would.
And we'll certainly talk about it.
Any other questions, Cheatham?
Just like to comment, I agree absolutely with everything Richard said, because Cheatham was the premier place when I was growing up, and we have a farm right next to it. We had the same problems where it just completely wiped out our herd, but now it's back, and I appreciate everything you're suggesting. I think it's a great idea.
And the other Region 2 WMA is Cedar Hill Swamp. Cedar Hill Swamp is about 200 acres in Robertson County, and right now the regulation says archery only for big game, and we want to allow hunters to use shotguns during turkey. So that's adding some opportunity there.
Any questions? Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, on the Cedar Hill, I'm not thoroughly familiar with it. Do you have any restrictions on the bag limit for hunters on that?
Oh, it's the same as statewide,
Okay, so it's statewide. Thank you.
except for archery only for big game right now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay, so you could kill 4 turkeys off this one WMA.
You could.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Richard.
All right. I'd like to introduce or bring up Kirk Miles, now from Region 3.
Thank you, Richard, and good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm going to be presenting recommendations for 7 wildlife management areas in Region 3. Most of these are relatively straightforward, simple, with the exception of Yuchi Refuge. We took a close look at Yuchi this year and have significant changes for that area. So with that in mind, I saved it for last. Clicker's not working. Okay. I guess. Sorry about that. Okay, starting with Catoosa Wildlife Management Area. The management goal for the deer herd on Catoosa is currently to promote the growth of the herd. And what this recommendation is targeting is to limit or reduce the harvest of does during our archery hunt. It's a 9-day hunt. Historically, this 9-day hunt has accounted for 80 to 85% of our antlerless, basically our doe harvest on the area. This proposal or this recommendation does 2 things. It simplifies the hunt by combining 3 3-day hunts into 1 9-day archery hunt, so we're not losing any hunting days. The big thing is the change in the bag limit. The prior bag limit was 1 deer, either sex, for each of those 3-day hunts. So theoretically, a hunter, if he hunted all the hunts, could harvest 3 does. With the new bag limit, 2 deer, no more than 1 antlered, theoretically a hunter might only harvest 2 does. So it's a minor tweak, but it's a start to try to promote the growth of the herd on Catoosa. Crooked Fork unit on Catoosa WMA is a new 1,200 acre addition to the management area. It's located in Morgan County. It's actually separate from Catoosa proper. It's separated by Clear Creek. And you'll notice we're basically setting it the same as statewide season, with the exception that we would like to close deer season on December 7th, and that's to allow small game hunters the opportunity to utilize some fairly large tracts of really good small game habitat that we're in the process of promoting and establishing on the unit. And the hunting equipment restrictions are there to address safety concerns. A lot of the land surrounding this tract are already heavily residential, and there's actually several new developments that are in the process of being developed around the area. On South Cherokee WMA, we're recommending that all harvested deer count toward the statewide bag limit. 2 of the South Cherokee deer hunts, one is an archery and one is a muzzleloader hunt, actually fall outside of the statewide seasons. And our law enforcement personnel, along with Forest Service personnel and their lands management folks, have raised concern that county harvested deer are being incorrectly checked in as harvested on the wildlife management area and inflating the harvest on our management area. So making these deer count towards statewide bag limit, we're hoping will alleviate that issue. This one is really easy. On Tellico Lake Wildlife Management Area, we're adding 2 young sportsman turkey hunts, 8 additional small game hunting days, primarily rabbit and squirrel, and 1 additional day on our young sportsman's deer hunt on the area. This one is very interesting to me. On Pea Ridge WMA for several years now, we've been working on establishing early successional or small game habitat. And this year, we think we have a quail population on this area that can tolerate some limited harvest. What this recommendation does, typically Pea Ridge is open with Unit B statewide seasons. We're proposing to close that big game season for a 1-week period, and during that 1 week have an early season young sportsman's quail hunt. The bag limit would be 2 birds per young sportsman hunter per day. Edgar Evins State Park, typically we have this hunt at the recommendation of state park personnel. Talking with them this year, they are not going to request the hunt for this season nor next season. Enterprise South Nature Park, we'd like to, increase our hunter quota from 15 to 25. There are 2 units on this area that we can hunt. We monitor the deer herd with abomasum surveys. This year, based on that data, we're able to open up both units on the area. Therefore, we can increase our quota, get more Hunt for Warriors guys out there to hunt. Okay, then we come to Yuchi. Before I start talking about Yuchi, I should mention that the primary management goal or function of Yuchi is a waterfowl refuge. As far as our refuges go in the region, Yuchi probably holds more waterfowl and beginning to hold more, a lot of sandhill cranes than any of our other waterfowl refuges. With that said, we manage that. The area is basically divided in half. Our bottomland areas are our primary waterfowl refuge, and then we have upland areas. And we plant the bottomland areas and flood the bottomland areas in the winter for waterfowl. The manager, we're having pretty serious crop depredation in the areas in the waterfowl refuge where we're trying to hold ducks. Losing up to 13 to 15% of the crops that we're trying to put in down there. So with all that in mind, our management goal for the deer herd on Yuchi is to decrease deer numbers across the area, ultimately hoping that we'll reduce crop damage within the waterfowl refuge portion. To do this, we're recommending to replace one archery hunt with 2 firearm hunts, remove the remaining archery hunt to a later date in the season, and to increase the bag limit on all of our deer hunts. Just some background, we had 2 archery hunts, had consistent low participation in the second hunt. For the past 5 years, they've killed 3 deer per hunt on that second hunt, and that's a 100 hunter quota. And that's the hunt that we're proposing to eliminate. By eliminating that, we can move the remaining archery hunt to later in the season and satisfy some hunter complaints that first hunt was too early, it was too hot. So we're hoping that it'll make it a more quality archery hunt. And of course, the addition of the 2 firearm hunts should help offset the loss of that 1 archery hunt. And increasing the bag limits, we're hoping increases our harvest. We're also proposing to remove the antler restrictions on Yuchi, which is 4 on a side or 15-inch outside spread, just to increase the opportunity for our young sportsmen to harvest a deer on their young sportsman hunt. Okay. Historically, our rabbit season, and this is specific to rabbit, has opened on Yuchi on October 30th, which is typically 1 week prior to the statewide season opening on rabbit. Hunters have realized this, and we've really seen an increased pressure on Yuchi during that week because they can go there, and it's one of the few places open to rabbit hunting. We've actually had hunters complain that the majority of the rabbits are being harvested during that early 1 week period, leaving none for later in the season, basically after our deer hunts. So we're proposing to set the statewide rabbit season the same as statewide dates. It'll also have the benefit of helping us avoid conflict with 6 of our deer quota hunts, hopefully letting the deer hunters kill more deer as well. Similarly with our raccoon opossum season, historically this opened with statewide, which was September 15th, and it closed on November 14th, which is the closure for the refuge. This proposal will open it on the last Tuesday in October, but run it through the remainder of the season. It actually provides an additional 79 days of hunting, and we're also increasing the bag limit on these hunts. Again, it'll help us avoid conflict with some of our deer quota hunts. I think 4 of the quota hunts, this would relieve some pressure during those hunts. I told you Yuchi was a big one.
I'm glad we took the break before the Yuchi.
Okay, yeah. Historically, We've opened the dove season on Yuchi on September 2nd, and it's been a youth hunt. Again, over the past 5 years, we've had an average of 5 hunters, youth hunters, and those 5 hunters have averaged killing 2 birds per hunter. This is pretty simple. We're just proposing to open dove hunting with the first segment of the statewide season, open to all, come hunt. Hopefully increase participation overall in the hunt. And I should also say we're planning to relocate this field from Yuchi to one of our waterfowl units, the upland part, where hopefully we can draw more birds and have an overall better hunt. On our wheelchair-bound hunts, we've historically had, I think, 2 3-day wheelchair-bound hunts. With this proposal, we're going to establish a wheelchair-bound zone. And basically, during any of our deer or turkey hunts, have a hunter quota that would allow wheelchair-bound hunters to hunt these zones. So rather than having 2 3-day hunt periods, they can sign up and hunt during any of the open hunts that we have. And we'll handle this through the regional office. We have a similar system for our wheelchair-bound waterfowl blind on the Varner tract. Hunters will call the regional office. They would reserve their spot. If that particular hunt was full, they would get their preference on the next hunt. And we would handle that all regionally through the office. Okay, the turkey season. Again, we've had consistent complaints from hunters on Yuchi. Basically, they're telling us that we're hunting the turkeys too much. They're telling us that the turkeys are unresponsive to calls on the later turkey hunts due to the fact that we have constant pressure leading up to those hunts. So to improve the overall quality of our turkey season, we are proposing to remove 1 hunt. What that allows us to do is to begin all of our hunts, all of our turkey hunts, earlier in the season. It will provide us a 1-week break between 2 of the hunts. And we're also going to be able to move a couple hunts that were scheduled on weekdays to weekends, hopefully to get more hunter participation out there. Overall, this proposal is basically just to try to improve the quality of our overall turkey hunts on Yuchi. This is the last one on Yuchi, and the last one. This is our Young Sportsman's Turkey Hunt on Yuchi. Again, we've had low participation. We want to try to increase participation. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday hunt. These are kids, and they're actually mostly in school on Fridays, so we're just going to would like to make it a Saturday, Sunday hunt, but we'd like to increase the quota from 10 to 15 to try to get more kids out there on the hunt.
All right. Thanks, Kirk.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, committee members? Commissioner Gardner?
I've got a few of them. Reference the Yuchi turkey hunts, Kirk.
Yes, sir.
You said that too many turkeys were being taken, but you were trying to expand to more weekends so more hunters could have access. And I was having a hard time reconciling those 2 facts.
It's not that too many turkeys are being taken.
Or too much pressure, I think is how you phrased it.
Yes, sir, pressure. The hunters, what the hunters are telling Greg, and he actually did a survey of hunters during the hunts, is that they would like to see the hunts moved earlier into the season was one thing. And they would like to see a break between some of the hunts because we were basically hunting the turkeys every weekend that we could with no break. And by no break, a couple of those hunts were even during the week. So by removing one hunt, it allowed us to move everything earlier. We could build some breaks between a couple of the hunts, and we also were able to take those weekday hunts and put them on a weekend. So it isn't concern about the actual harvest of turkeys. It's more concern about how can we try to make this a more quality hunt when a guy comes to hunt Yuchi.
Okay, thank you. And then additionally, if you still have some weekdays that are on the schedule, because no dates were on there, so it's kind
On
of
the
hard to-
turkey hunts?
Yeah, or is
are
it
you
just
looking at-
weekends only then?
It should be now. Are you looking at the red line?
No, I was curious, since the dates weren't on there, and you're taking away that.
No, sir. Okay, I got you. No, sir, all the work now will be on weekends.
So no hunts during the week?
No hunts.
People that work the weekends, for instance, now they don't have access to that.
Well, I guess that's, our thinking was that more people were working through the week.
Well, I think that percentage-wise, that's correct, but
Yes.
there are people that work.
We could, I think we could look at leaving one of those maybe through the week, yes.
Those hunts are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
It's a 3-day hunt, I'm sorry. So
Okay.
there will be a Friday, but
I
we
just,
could,
I-
I see what you're saying.
I worked shift work all my life,
Yes, sir.
7 days, 365, and weekends aren't always available to everybody, and so I just wanted to make sure we weren't cutting out a segment of the hunters that were using it previously
Yes, sir.
that you would now take out of the picture.
Yes, sir.
And then one last thing, I'm sorry, on the South Cherokee WMA,
Yes, sir.
you mentioned that the deer hunting dates are outside of the state dates.
On 2 of the hunts, that is correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
and then
sir.
you also mentioned that the bag limit didn't go towards your statewide bag limit. So it sounds like the adjustment you're making is not to, instead of changing the dates to coincide within the dates, you're kind of meeting it halfway and just saying, well, let's count it toward the bag limit. And is that the intent, and to keep the dates outside so that opportunity's still there? I was trying to figure out the strategy there.
Yes, sir, you've got it, you figured it out.
Okay.
That's
All right.
exactly.
I just wanna make sure
We
I
actually
understand it
really
correctly.
can't, really on South Cherokee because of the bear hunts, and we really restricted on when we can have those deer hunts. So really moving the deer hunts is much less of an option than putting them towards statewide bag limit.
Yeah, but you feel like that law enforcement issue would be resolved by simply counting it towards the bag limit, not necessarily changing the dates to within the state, the previous state?
I do, because the implication there is that those were bonus deer.
Right.
So making them count toward the statewide bag limit will force the hunter. The hunter's not going to be able to say, "Oh, I can check this on Cherokee." He's not going to have it's going to count against him
Right,
rather than
right.
possibly giving him an additional deer.
Okay,
Does
well,
that
thank
make
you very
sense?
much. I appreciate it. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other questions for Kirk from committee members? Any questions from the public? Thanks, Kirk.
Yes, sir.
John Mike.
Kirk was supposed to introduce me, and I guess,
I took over for him.
okay. Well, part of it, I guess he got Yuchi to death, so. I am John Mike, I'm the Regional Program Manager for Region 4, and I'm here to present recommendations on 4 WMAs in Region 4. That's Chuck Swan, North Cumberland, Buffalo Springs, and Forks River WMA. And I'm doing a little different than Kirk. Most of mine are at Chuck Swan, so I'm starting with Chuck Swan first. All right. All right, our first recommendation is shift the dates of the muzzleloader deer quota hunt to the Friday and Saturday after opening of the statewide muzzleloader season. And one thing to keep in mind about Chuck Swan, the reason we're coming up with this idea, our current muzzleloader and 2 gun hunts are on consecutive weekends, which is a tremendous amount of pressure in a 3 weekend period. So this will allow a break in the hunting between the muzzleloader and gun hunts, and this will spread out the pressure within that period and basically improve the quality of those hunts. This is something that the hunters have asked us to look at, and we've had a few weeks there where we can move this muzzleloader up. So that's the reason that recommendation. Our second recommendation is change the bag limit of the archery quota hunt from 1 deer either sex to 1 antler deer. The justification behind this is the deer population at Chuck Swan experienced a major EHD breakout this year, and by eliminating all antlerless harvest, we're hoping to rebound the herd. And as you can see in the recommendation, we're still going to allow young sportsmen to take antlerless deer. But just as a little side note, the Chuck Swan TWA staff and the Tennessee Division Forestry staff found a little over 200 deer dead. So it was a hard hit. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. All right, our next recommendation is shift the dates of the Chuck Swan WMA Young Sportsman Deer Hunt to the Saturday and Sunday before the statewide Young Sportsman Deer Hunt. This will allow young sportsmen additional opportunity to the statewide Young Sportsman Deer Hunt. And currently, the Young Sportsman Deer Hunt at Chuck Swan occurs on the same weekend as the statewide. And because of that, our participation on the WMA's been down. If we move this to the weekend before, there's going to be a little more opportunity there for the kids, and hopefully we can entice some kids to come hunt. I hit the same button, it's still going the wrong way. All right. This has been mentioned a little bit before on some of the other stuff, that at Chuck Swan, we'd like to standardize the dates of the big game quota hunts on the area and use the generic verbiage to establish those dates on weekends. And within that, this is going to prevent redundancy of setting specific hunt dates in the WMA Proclamation each year. The dates will be updated in the hunting guide, and in that, this will be shown in the hunting guide, and these are the dates that are related to those generically described weekends when the hunts will occur. All right, going from big game to small game at Chuck Swan, we're wanting to move the raccoon hunts. Currently, they occur the first 7 consecutive nights in November, and what we're wanting to do is move those coon hunts to the Sunday following the second gun deer hunt. And what this will do, this will allow the coon hunts to take place after the deer quota hunts. Also, we've had hunters request us to move these hunts later in the year, because the first 7 days of November, sometimes it's warm. Also, you have a lot of trees that are still holding their leaves, and because of that, they're having trouble finding the raccoons up in the tree, and it's making for some poor hunts. So this is something hunters have asked, or raccoon hunters have asked us to do, and we feel like we can accommodate that. The last one for Chuck Swan is concerning the dog training season, and we're wanting to delete the verbiage of pointing breed dogs prohibited. This statement's no longer needed. This was something that was put in there 16 years ago. So it's something that we've been overlooking. Area manager contacted us, and he said, I would like to have this removed. It's owed. So that's the reason that's been brought forth. Going from Chuck Swan to North Cumberland. As you can see here, it says allow 2 antler deer during muzzleloader and move antlerless days from December to opening week. And to explain all that, at Chuck Swan, at North Cumberland, it's same as statewide seasons, but to allow herd growth, we've set the bag limits where we're still allowing opportunity. And we set up a chart a few years ago, and the hunters were being confused as to when they could kill an antler deer, and when they could kill an antlerless deer. We got with the area manager, talked to him about it. We looked at the deer data. So to simplify the hunting chart and still being biologically sound, this is what we came up with. And as mentioned, this will reduce the confusion and will accommodate hunter requests. So when you look at the chart, if you've noticed the old chart in the hunting guide concerning North Cumberland, you can see it's very wordy. And this is going to reduce the verbiage. It's going to make it easier to understand. So, and when we do this, for archery, there's going to be no change. For the muzzleloader, basically there's going to be no increase in the total deer that they could take it in the past, but they're going to have the opportunity to take both their antler deer during the muzzleloader. During the gun season, no change in total deer, but we're moving their opportunity to kill an antlerless deer from the last part of December to the first 7 days of the gun season. Young sportsmen, no change. At Buffalo Springs, currently at Buffalo Springs, it's same as the statewide dove season, and this is our second most popular dove field in Region 4, and it's getting a lot of pressure, and the hunters have asked us to do something to try to improve the quality of the hunt so they can have doves in there for a few more days. So what we're recommending to do is establish dove hunting dates. And for 2018, we're looking at September 1, 3, and 8. And then the season will be open, same as statewide thereafter. For 2019, September 1, 2, and 7. And then open with statewide seasons thereafter. And what this will do, during that first segment or first week of the dove season, we're going to have breaks in there where those doves will not be hunted, where they can come in and feed, where they can rest, and they'll still be there. And as you know, notice that's opening day, Labor Day, and then the next Saturday after Labor. So that's when we have most of our hunters show up, and we're just trying to improve the quality of the hunt. Forks the river. We're wanting to change the wording regarding usage of trails, and what we're wanting to put in there is perimeter trail open year-round. Perimeter trail is defined as the Will Skelton Greenway, Whaley Trail, and Western Perimeter Trails. All other trails open only to hunters from September 1 through May 31, and the completion of the Western Perimeter Trail has allowed us to simplify the language as to when hunters and other users of the WMA can be on there and where they can be there. One thing that you need to remember about Forks of the River, it's almost in downtown Knoxville, so we got folks that want to hunt the area, we got folks that want to walk the trails. So in identifying these trails, when they're open, we're cutting down on some of the conflict, and we're trying to provide a balance on this WMA so that multiple users can use it. And with that, I'm open to questions.
All right, thanks, John. Any questions? Mr. Box?
Thank you, sir. On Chuck Swan, are those all bonus turkeys? Are they on Chuck Swan, the limit?
Those are deer hunts.
Okay.
No.
On the number of turkeys for Chuck Swan, what's the?
Oh, the spring turkey hunts are bonus birds.
They're bonus birds.
Yeah.
Okay. Why is that not with statewide line? Sorry.
All the deer count towards statewide bag limit.
Okay.
I should have said that. At Chuck Swan, part of that is to have folks come out. Just to get to the front gate is 12 miles off the main road. So because of that, we had something that we felt like would draw a few folks in. The quota is 150. And even with 150 quota now, where it's still a bonus bird, he's only having like 75 people show up. 75, I think 75 was the low one year. I haven't asked him for his numbers this year. But I can remember on one hunt, the low end was 75. And then the most has been like 115. So, and don't hold me exactly to those numbers. I'd have to go back and look for sure, but that's sort of a rough idea. So it's try to bring a few folks in because it's a long ways off the road.
Thank you.
John, I've got a question to go along with that. You said there's not 150 drawn, so obviously people can buy those permits.
No,
If they're
there's, the quota's 150. Out of that 150
You're only getting about 70 to 80 people.
that show up.
Right, so
They're
I guess what I'm
drawn.
saying is someone could purchase,
No, sir.
you can't buy leftover.
There's
Or
nothing
they could
left
put
over.
in for all 5 hunts.
They just don't come.
No, that's not what I'm asking. You can put in for all 5 hunts if you're a sportsman license holder, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my point is you can kill 5 turkeys on Chuck Swan.
No, sir.
Why?
You can put in for all 5 hunts as your, my mind's gonna blank. You could only get drawn for 1 hunt. Out of those 5, you can apply for all 5 as your preference on your application. Like Chuck Swan has 5 hunts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over here on your preference side.
You
if
couldn't
want-
pay to put in for every, I thought you could pay to put in for as many hunts as you wanted to.
So, but if, you're just only allowed to get drawn for 1. Or not. I never have heard of anybody getting drawn for 2 turkey hunts at
Okay.
Chuck Swan.
Commissioner Cox?
Is that true on all these WMA quota hunts?
No, sir.
That you
I
can
know-
only get drawn one
I know
time?
on deer, some folks get drawn for 2 hunts. And part of that's how it gets filled.
That's why it's a little hard to keep up with.
Well, part of the concern is that somebody could hunt and go to 6 different WMAs and kill 6 turkeys because they're all bonus,
If they're bonus.
or deer, either one.
If they're bonus. Yes, sir. Oh, could I ask Sonia to?
Yes, Sonia, come up here and tell us who you are.
She is the quota hunt expert.
I was the quota hunt coordinator 12 years until it's December when I took my promotion as the assistant chief of the licensing division. So let's slow down just a second. Now, are we talking like spring turkey for Chuck Swan?
Spring turkey.
We only hold 1 drawing for spring turkey. You can only get 1 permit for a drawing. So even if you put in 5 choices, you're only going to get drawn for 1. Deer, you are correct. We run 2 drawings for the wildlife management area quota hunts. So the maximum you'll be drawn for is 2 hunts.
Okay.
Did that clear up the confusion for you all? Is there anything else I can answer for you?
I don't think it was just Chuck Swan. The point was that whether it was any WMA within 50 miles of there, 100 miles or whatever, a hunter could apply and get drawn for 6 WMAs. There's a different quota hunt for Yuchi. There's a different quota hunt for Chuck Swan. There's a different one for Cheatham. There's a different one for whatever.
But those are all encompassed within the wildlife management area quota hunt, and so the maximum you're going to get drawn for is 2 permits for 2 hunts.
So you're not, you can't game the system and get drawn 7 times,
No, sir.
no matter where in the state it might be.
That is correct, sir.
Okay, good.
But if it's not a quota hunt, then, and if there are bonus birds or deer, then you can go from WMA to WMA. Just such as Laurel Hill has 3 bonus bucks, you could kill 3 bucks on Laurel Hill.
Outside of the quota hunt program. Yes,
If
sir.
it
that's
was,
true.
if, I'm just saying that, if Laurel Hill was, I'm not saying that's irregular, I'm just saying if a WMA, allows for bonus bucks. So I think that's the worry of the Wildlife Committee, is that, we're concerned with the bonus birds. Its perception is you can go from, WMA to WMA, especially if it's not a quota hunt, and kill a large number of birds. So, I would like the agency to look at that, closely. Chuck, if you, and Bobby, but look at the effect it would have if we did away with bonus birds, maybe everybody other than wounded warriors, but just give us an update on that in May if you would. Any other questions for John? Commissioner McLerran.
John Mike, you being the last speaker here from the regional, you get the sum questions for all 4 of them.
Well, Sonia's done put my bacon out of the fire once. So.
Okay. First off, I'd like to say I have seen a lot of good thoughts and comments all across the state, and I know that come from many hours and many people working together to bring those proposals to us. One of the things that I think I'm understanding, do we have trouble filling these youth hunts on the WMAs? Was that a recurring theme from all 4 regions? Or are you filling the youth hunts?
Region 4, we're filling, Chuck Swan is the only WMA that we have that's quota hunts. And we're filling the hunt, but we're that, on our part, I'll just put it that way, on our part at Chuck Swan, where that hunt is occurring, same as the statewide. The kids are getting drawn, but also some of them have private property they can hunt, and I got to take something back because I forgot the juvenile hunt or young sportsman hunt at Chuck Swan is the only hunt we have that is a bonus deer. And even it being a bonus deer, a lot of those kids are being torn. I've got a big buck here. I'm going to have the first chance to take it on my grandfather's farm, but I can kill me a bonus deer at Chuck Swan. It's causing the kids a lot of issue. And on our part, in moving that hunt a week earlier, it's going to take care of that issue. So even though the quota's being filled, the participation's been low, and we're just trying to figure out some way so we can increase the participation.
So the interest is there?
The interest is there.
Okay. What about the other 3 regions? Are you having trouble filling those spots?
No, sir. The quota hunts are, for the youth quota hunts, they are being filled through the draw.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any questions from the public? Thanks, John.
Thank you. Oh, I would like to call Joy Sweeney back up front.
Can I ask a question or make a statement before you start, please?
Commissioner
And
Cobb.
I should have asked this earlier when we were on, I'll digress back to Region 1. Wolf River WMA was, don't know the year for sure, but back in the 90s, Wolf River WMA was, first 4,000 acres was purchased for about $4 million, and Gary Cook, who was the regional manager, and we discussed how, I think it was done 2001 or 2, but anyway, thought it might be a really good place to have a primo archery WMA. So it's been archery only except for 2 weeks of muzzleloader for a long time. And my hunting place was right next door for 25 years, and we hunted part of this for years before the Beasley sold it to the state. But all that being said, we've got about 7,000 or 8,000 acres now in that contiguous WMA that's archery only, and 2 weeks of muzzleloader that about 20 or 25 archers have the run of the whole place. And I think that effort, while it was a good idea, has not worked out for 150 or 200 people to hunt that area. And I would I'm going to propose that Wolf River be open to rifle hunting now, Jim, whether it's statewide season or quota or something. I'd like for y'all to discuss it, and you may come back and argue that you don't want to do anything, and that's fine, but I think we're underusing a 7,000 or 8,000 acre WMA that we've got $6 or $7 million in for 20 or 25 archers, and I'm sure they like it. And I've talked to some of them, and they would like to see rifle season opened on it. But if you would talk about that and maybe call me and we can discuss it or something, and maybe come back with something in May, I sure would appreciate it.
I address that right now.
You may.
Okay.
Since I warned you.
Okay, Commissioner. Give me just a minute. Where's the mouse go? Anybody up here? Oh, it didn't do. There you go. Okay. How do I get to my slides?
I guess he may, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
Tell him no if you want to.
Well, we're definitely on a time.
Yeah, I understand. It
limited,
won't take
so-
but a second if. special slides go? There you go. Yeah, right one right there. Let's go. Okay. All right. Okay, on Wolf River, we've got Commissioner Cox is correct. This is basically the original purchase. It's 6,700 acres. And can y'all see the, how'd that work? There we go. Anyway, this is the original purchase where this line is. The rest of it up here is state natural area. This was Commissioner Cox's right here, I believe. Thank you. What's that? It's closed, yeah. And that's the original purchase on it, and it's open to, it's open to, there we go. This is open to archery hunting, and it's open to the 3-week muzzleloader season. And then we have it open, and we do a lot of small game work. It's open to rabbit hunters. It's for rabbit hunting. It's mainly what it is. But rabbit hunters, small game hunters have nowhere to hunt on anywhere in West Tennessee until deer season's over. So we reserve it for rabbit hunters. It's not just for the 25 archery hunters. Most of this is swamp in here. Right in through here is all swamp, and the open fields are for deer hunting. So, I mean, excuse me, they're managed for rabbit, small game. So we also have Wolf River Unit 2, 4,300 acres, that's open to statewide seasons, gun hunters, anything. And so we just added this other 700 acres here. A lot of people like to hunt it. I've had a lot of good questions or comments on.
Small game too.
It's open small game, but it's deer also. Most people deer hunt in there.
I get it.
So we do have 4,300 acres for them to deer hunt on with a rifle. So we will take into consideration your request.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Joy?
Okay, Commissioners, thanks for having me back. I'm here to propose recommendations to be done on national wildlife refuges. National wildlife refuges are federal lands in Tennessee that are managed and run by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And in order for them to have valid hunting regulations, they pass through their recommendations to us so that we can recommend them to you, but there's no coordination or collaboration in developing these recommendations. It's just a pass-through, and I'm just here to tell you what they are. And so, we made it to my slide. Thank you. And all the recommendations are on these 4 specific areas, and then I'll go through them one by one. All the recommendations are liberalizations of the current regulations. And so on Hatchie, NWR, they would like to open the small game season during the archery, deer, and the spring squirrel seasons, whereas before, or currently, it is closed. For waterfowl, they would like to open the waterfowl season every day of the statewide season. Currently, it's only open certain days of the week. And for spring turkey, currently the bag limit is 1 bird, and they would like to make it same as statewide. And for deer, they would like to add a quota hunt that lasts 1 day for hunts for warriors with a quota of 10. On Chickasaw and Lower Hatchie National Wildlife Refuges, they would like to open small game after the first 4 weeks of deer gun season. Currently, it's closed throughout the gun season. And they'd like to open up spring squirrel, same as statewide. And for Sunk Lake Public Use Management Area, they would also like to have that area open up with this statewide spring squirrel season. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Joy? Committee members? Questions from the public? Thank you again, Joy.
Oh, you're welcome.
And that concludes our presentation.
Right. Thank you, Chuck. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the business of the Wildlife Committee.
Thank you, Chairman Holbert. Great job to get us through that. And so now let's move along to the boating and law enforcement. I'd like to recognize Chairman Box.
Thank you, sir. Okay. I'd like to call on Lieutenant Colonel Taylor, please, with, hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are
Boating
you?
and law enforcement, I'm good.
If it pleases you, Commissioner Box, Chris Richardson has asked if he could make a couple of comments prior to me beginning this presentation.
Sure.
Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Taylor and Chairman Box. The first few slides that Kate's going to talk to you about are some manner and means changes. One thing that came up during the General Assembly this session that I wanted to update the Commission on was a piece of legislation that was aimed at legalizing the use of the air bow, or a pneumatically charged weapon that is capable of firing an arrow for use by disabled hunters during all of our big game seasons. That bill was brought by Representative Jerry Sexton of Bean Station, Tennessee, and it was presented in committee. In conversations with the representative and other members of the General Assembly, I made them aware that this commission has the authority to set the manner and means. That, not to say that the legislature couldn't pass a bill that would legalize that, but I let him know that this commission has that authority to make changes to our manner and means through proclamation, which may in fact be an easier method. And at that time, I made a commitment to the representative that I would bring a proposal relative to the air bows before the commission for your consideration. I didn't make any commitments that we would in any way pass anything, but the legislation that was brought was aimed at making an accommodation for those disabled individuals that may not be able to withstand the recoil of a firearm, or may not be able to pull back a bow or even cock a crossbow. Was the aim of the representative to allow for an alternative style weapon that may be easier for those folks to use. One of the major concerns we had with the legislation was that it was presented in a manner that didn't really clearly define what was a disabled person and what wasn't. It basically was kind of the old system that we had in place in Tennessee at one point for the use of crossbows, whereas I'm sure Dr. Cook knows you could walk into a doctor's office and request this accommodation through a note, and then you'd be eligible to use that weapon. What Cape's going to go into more depth in discussing, our recommendation to you is going to be to legalize the use of air bows for those individuals that possess a specific disabled license type that we currently offer. There's actually 4 license types that would qualify. One being blind and one being intellectually disabled. I don't think we'll have much or any usage from those individuals in the utilization of an air bow, but technically they qualify under the recommendation. The 2 main types of license holders that may utilize this proposal would be our disabled veterans and our those individuals that are permanently confined to a wheelchair. Both of those license types have to be verified. In the case of a veterans, it has to be with a disability rating from the VA. And in the case of the permanently confined to a wheelchair, it has to be verified through a doctor's note that you are in fact permanently confined to a wheelchair. And all of those license types can only be sold in-house in the central office. So those applications have to be processed before those types can be sold. So I say that to say what we are proposing to you, and I know that Mike Butler did some survey work on the use of air bows and what our archery hunters might think of it. And I know that there's some concern about the archery hunters' feelings about the use of air bow during archery. We're not proposing that everybody get to use an air bow during archery. What we're proposing is a very limited accommodation for hopefully those individuals that need it the most. So with that, and before I turn it back over to Lieutenant Colonel Taylor, does the Commission have any questions relative to the legislative process or kind of that aspect of this air bow proposal? Thank you.
As I stated, I'm going to be previewing the proposed changes to the Proclamation 1805, Manner and Means of Hunting, Taking, and Trapping. The first section you'll see here, if you look to your red line copy of your proclamation, it'll be the section that has the table. And as you look through that table, we're going to add 3 new columns there. And the first one would be adding air guns .35 caliber or larger for deer, elk, and bear. And if you'll notice, those have a small number beside those. That one will have a number 8, which we'll address in the next slide. The second addition will be a pre-charged pneumatic gun which shoots an arrow, and special additions apply in that so that when that goes into the hunting regulations, they'll know that that's not open for everyone. And this will be for the big game species only, and it has a number 9 beside it, which we'll discuss momentarily. And the last one will be raptors that are legally possessed under a valid falconry permit, all categories legal except for big game. So it'll be good for fur bears, small game, and migratory birds. As Jamie talked about earlier, we removed the falconry proclamation we had and opened up and put those back in the small game, the waterfowl, and so on, so that they could be contained in one proclamation, or in the specific proclamations for those species. And staying consistent with how we do with our weapons, we consider the raptor being their hunting method, and for lack of a better term, that's their weapon of choice, is the raptor. So we felt like it needed to go in manner and means, a legal means of take. So that's why we moved that into that. These are the numbers that I had just mentioned, the small numbers to the right of those in the box. And number 8 for the rifle says it must use a pre-charged pneumatic firing mechanism. And number 9 is broken down into 2 parts, which will be an A and a B. The first one is related to persons possessing a permanent disabled license which may use a pre-charged pneumatic gun which shoots an arrow during the archery, deer, bear, and elk season as an accommodation for the disability, which is what Chris was talking about, that it's only as an accommodation that during the archery and muzzleloader, no one will be able to use that. Except for, in B, in a pre-charged pneumatic gun which shoots an arrow is legal for all hunters during the modern gun season for deer, bear, elk, and turkey. Let me back up. The muzzleloader, this is not legal for the accommodation. It would just be in archery. Where I said muzzleloader will be only for archery as an accommodation because believing that they could shoot the muzzleloader. To the next slide, this goes under Section 2 of Prohibited Acts. We get a lot of questions in our office and statewide wanting to know if it's legal to hunt with a drone, which we've called an unmanned aerial vehicle per definition. And we just put in here as a prohibited act that an unmanned aerial vehicle cannot be used to hunt any wildlife. And from that, you know, we would just apply that to our definition of hunting, which is found in the Tennessee Code. Number 8 under prohibited acts would be letter I, or letter L, I'm sorry. Cervid urine, except for synthetic for hunting, would be prohibited. The prohibition on use or possession during hunting season would not become effective until March 1st, 2019. And that was added so that the retailers could prepare for a change like this and order accordingly their product. The next one is relative to big game check-in related to bear, and we're going to make a recommendation to take in the physical check-in away unless special bear hunts regulations apply. So all harvested bears must be checked in at approved checking station, TWRA website, or by mobile app. And it goes through the same wording about the bears being field dressed, must weigh 75 pounds or greater when possessed a field. And if they're quartered, boned out, the total meat, hide, etc. must weigh 75 pounds. And we've removed the portion which says about the reproductive sex organs remain attached. That'd be removed. And the reason we put the wording in that says unless special hunt regulations apply is based off of what we were talking about earlier with the bear seasons. When we go to the Kettlefoot and Laurel Fork hunts, those will have to be physically checked in at the specific check stations that's set up by their division. That concludes this presentation.
I got a question. On that playing devil's advocate, when you say a drone cannot be used to hunt any wildlife, what about using a drone to scout wildlife?
Can you put that up? I've got a slide that has our definition on there, and I think it'll be easier to look at this. And scouting would be okay to do, because if you read at the bottom of this, it goes through what you can and can't do as far as what's considered hunting. At the bottom, it says, does not include stalking, attracting, searching for, lining wait for wildlife by an unarmed person solely for the purpose of watching wildlife or taking pictures of wildlife. So, you know, the case would have to be made by an officer if it was a violation of hunting, something that we could present to the DA that could be prosecuted.
Go ahead, Connie.
Make sure I understand this, clarify for me, back to the airboats. So a person that's disabled and can use the airboat during archery season?
Correct.
But not during muzzleloader season?
That's correct.
But then they can use it again during gun season?
Everybody can use it during gun season. That's the proposal.
But nobody during?
Nobody during muzzleloader.
Why?
Question from the, go ahead.
Would, excuse me, would a drone be permissible to hunt for down game when somebody's searching for?
Not per this definition, I wouldn't think. It's in search of, and it's game that downed or may be downed.
I've got a question, please, ma'am. Why would you not allow an airboat during muzzleloader?
Because it's not an accommodation for somebody. They can
But they can use it
shoot.
in rifle season.
They can. Everybody can.
I know, but why couldn't everybody use it in muzzleloader?
Because we only wanted to allow it as an accommodation for somebody that had these particular license.
I understand that in archery, but muzzleloader's a firearm.
Correct.
So there's no biological basis, just.
Well, it's like using anything else in muzzleloader. I mean, we could open it up to whatever we wanted to in that season. We just didn't recommend that.
Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the public? Yes, sir. State your name again, please.
Steve Nifone. Understand from surveys and whatever, there is consideration about changing the muzzleloader season to a primitive weapon season. I'd like to go on record in support of the agency position not to do that. The muzzleloader season is a long-serving tradition. I participated in my first one probably in the early 1970s. I see no reason to change it. The people wanting to use some of these other weapons have over 7 weeks that they can legally use them during the gun deer season. Some of the recommendation I've read, I don't know where they will end up. It would be an enforcement nightmare for our enforcement staff to try to enforce the regulations. I would ask the commission that if they choose to go down that road, that rather than changing the muzzleloader season, they look to talking about the revenues generated in the 2 seasons, just come with the firearms and archery season where all these things can be combined at that time. I don't think we need to change the muzzleloader season at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Cook?
Thank you, Chairman Box. And I'd like to thank everyone in the agency for, I know this is a all men on deck for the wildlife season setting, so I know the countless hours that go into this, months of preparation, so thank you very much for the hard work and appreciate all you do. So Director Carter, is it my understanding that Robin will not be here tomorrow?
Honestly, don't know. I know she wasn't planning on being. I don't know if she can be or not.
Well, could she go ahead with her presentation now, and then we'll, because if there's a question she can't be here tomorrow, maybe go on now.
She says she can be here, Chairman Cook, if you would rather push it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do that tomorrow then. Do a little more, can't we? Do another presentation. Yeah. I'd like to call on Chairman Woodson for the Fisheries Management Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call on Brandon Simcox, the Streams and Trout Coordinator for the Fisheries Division.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. I'll try to keep this brief. I'm going to give a short introduction into the recent discovery of whirling disease in two tailwaters in East Tennessee, the South Holston and the Watauga tailwaters. Kind of how do we got to this point of this recent discovery? It actually started with our neighbors in North Carolina in 2016. They discovered the presence of whirling disease in the Watauga watershed, and so our Region 4 trout managers proactively wanted to address the issue and began collecting samples from South Holston and Watauga and sent those off to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and then this January we got word back that they were indeed positive. So what is whirling disease? Well, it's actually the onset symptoms of an infection of a non-native parasite, Myxobolus cerebralis. It's a myxozoan parasite. Falls into a clade of parasitic jellyfish. It's native to Europe. It was first described in the early 1900s and first discovered in the United States in the 1950s, and has since spread to all the western states with trout populations, most of the Northeast, and then most recently here in North Carolina and in Tennessee. One unique thing about this parasite is it actually requires a trout or salmon specific host for it to complete its life cycle. So there should be no concerns of whether or not you can eat the fish or it's spreading to other fish species. So real briefly, part of its life cycle here. So once introduced into the system, it is ingested by a common sediment-dwelling worm found in streams and rivers throughout the country. Within that worm, it begins to transform into this free-floating spore stage known as TAMS. That is then released in the worm's waste, and it will drift along in the water column for up to 2 weeks until it comes in contact with a trout or it dies from some sort of environmental condition. So once it comes in contact with a trout, it will ingest or infect it with these myxospores. Within 20 days, it travels down the central nervous system of the trout and begins tackling the cartilage and the skeletal tissue of the fish. Once the trout eventually dies and decays, the myxospores are then released back into the water column and the life cycle starts over. Something really important for us to consider, though, is that infection from the parasite does actually not always equal the fish becoming diseased or developing the symptoms of whirling disease. The mechanisms that really contribute to a fish becoming diseased are really still not fully understood in the literature, but they can vary between life history stage of the fish. So younger year generally, or small fish are generally more susceptible to becoming a diseased fish. It can vary by species of fish or even strains of fish. So just what the symptoms are if a fish does actually develop a whirling disease. Classically, and for the namesake of it, they can develop a whirling or tail chasing swimming behavior. They also will develop a black tail or can develop a black tail or display skeletal deformities in the spine or in the head. And these all result from inflammation from the attacking of that skeletal tissue. Generally, mortality actually results from the inability for the fish to evade predators or to feed properly. In general, rainbow trout are the most vulnerable trout species to developing the symptoms of whirling disease, while brown trout, which are native to Europe, where the disease or where the parasite is from, are generally asymptomatic carriers, meaning that they can certainly be infected by the parasite, but doesn't necessarily mean that they will develop the symptoms of whirling disease, and generally don't unless heavily infested. So just some pictures to show you what these symptoms look like. On the left side there, those are some younger year rainbow trout from the Colorado River. And then on the right is some of the deformed skulls. And that's actually from the few fish that we have encountered that are displaying these signs, we are seeing that they have that deformed skull. See if this works here. Well, I guess it's, let's see, not going to work. So this video here was just is going to be showing. Oh, here it goes. That whirling behavior that they can develop, and you can see with younger year fish doing that it's going to be hard to make a living. You can also see that classic the blacktail. So what impacts have many of these other states seen where whirling disease has become present? Well, it really varies quite a bit. In general, most of the states that have become infected with the parasite and whirling disease have not seen any real population level impacts. However, it is most famously probably noted for the impacts that were seen on the Madison River in Montana and sections of the Colorado River in Colorado. These sections of the Colorado River were once regarded as one of the best wild trout, rainbow trout fisheries in the world. And the parasite was introduced into the system in the late 80s. By the early 90s, virtually all rainbow trout reproduction was wiped out, and subsequently the rainbow trout population was nearly wiped out. Similarly, in some of their high alpine areas where this parasite got into brown trout populations at lower elevations, it naturally was moved upstream, and they saw similar reductions in brook trout populations in those areas. So where do we fall along those lines? Well, as to date, we haven't seen any negative population level impacts from all the sampling, the 20-year data set that we have. And that's something that actually we'd probably expect. As I mentioned earlier, brown trout are generally asymptomatic carriers of it. And the South Holston and the Watauga rivers are regarded as one of the premier wild brown trout fisheries in the southeast. And our rainbow trout fishery within those two rivers are generally supported by stocking of adult rainbow trout. However, the potential for any management strategies that would lead to the Watauga or the South Holston becoming also a wild rainbow trout fishery could potentially be diminished. Our immediate concerns, though, are with the potential spread of the parasite and development of whirling disease in wild trout populations within the area. East Tennessee supports well over 800 miles of wild populations of brook, brown, and rainbow trout. So there's a concern there with the movement of it. The steps that the agency is currently taking will begin disease monitoring in wild trout populations and popular tailwaters across East Tennessee. We also will continue our annual monitoring within our hatcheries. We sample for not only whirling disease but many other diseases annually, and we have not come back with any positive hits within our hatcheries. And protocols are in place to ensure that we don't bring whirling disease into our hatcheries. We've also been doing a lot of consulting with neighboring states that do have whirling disease, and then also with universities. The Southeastern Cooperative Fish Parasite and Disease Lab at Auburn University has been an extremely big help. They are the leaders in whirling disease research in the Southeast, and so they've been a wealth of knowledge. And here within the next week or so, we will be meeting, or next few weeks, we'll be meeting with the Southern Division of the American Fisheries Society, the Trout Committee, and the Aquatic Nuisance Species and Biosecurity Subcommittee to talk about such issues. And also importantly, so I failed to mention, based off the life cycle of this parasite, once it's established, it's basically impossible for us to get rid of it. So the best thing for us to do is to spread the word, because prevention really is the only option that we have from it getting into any other areas. And so we're sticking with the clean, drain, dry method or message. And we're also encouraging anglers to not transfer live or dead trout between trout streams, and to make sure that they carefully dispose of their fish if they are harvesting them. Dry disposal is preferred. Region 3 managers were pretty proactive and partnered with a local high school and a shop class at a local high school, and they developed these wader cleaning stations, and those now have been spread out across East Tennessee to include to many fly shops, and then also in areas of the Cherokee National Forest for anglers to come by and clean their gear as they're coming home or getting ready to go up into the mountains. We've also developed an informational website to try to address any of those potential concerns that anglers do have. And then probably most importantly, we developed an angler reporting system so that if any anglers come across fish that have potential signs of whirling disease, that we have a mechanism of capturing that. With that, I'll take any questions.
Great. Commissioner Sanders?
Just one question.
Yep.
I know out west where you mentioned Montana and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
they have restrictions on felt soils and things like that. Have we looked at that?
No, we have not.
And will it solve the problem, or will it help prevent the problem if we haven't?
So the fly fishing industry was actually pretty proactive in that, and some of the wading companies went to move to full-blown vibram sole waders. And the market didn't really take, fly fishermen didn't really grab onto it, or stream fishermen, people buying waders. And one of their concerns also was it gave anglers the false sense of hope that because they had vibram sole waders, that the chances of them spreading the disease was still diminished. But these parasites can get in the mud, so it can get in boots, or in seams, laces, in your, different parts of the waders. So I don't know if that would necessarily really drive it home. It would still take cleaning of your gear and all that to help prevent it.
Commissioner Swan?
Assuming there were no fish in the stream,
Mm-hmm.
how long would the parasite stay in the stream?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on how long it can last. I've seen in the literature up to several years, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
So when this gets in a fish, let's say somebody has one with whirling disease,
Mm-hmm.
and they dispose of the fish, does the disease or does parasite go with the fish and potentially infect something else? Even though
does,
the fish
yeah.
may be dead?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and so that's one of the things with proper disposal of the fish, and why suggesting dry disposal is best, because they've actually seen the parasite able to make it through wastewater treatment plants. So it could potentially still make it through your sink out into a stream if it is then dumped back into a area where trout populations are. But also, yeah, cleaning on your stream bank, things like that. If you're camping at an additional site, off river, if you caught a fish in the South Holston Watauga, went back to nearby trout stream that you were camping on, potentially spread
Or
it.
if you catch a fish and say clean it someplace else and throw the intestines and so forth into the water, then it spreads the parasite.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the prognosis?
On?
Excuse me. Once it gets in a stream.
Yeah, so many of the especially the eastern states really haven't seen negative impacts from the parasite being introduced into their streams. And like I said, the mechanisms that really that lead to those population level impacts are still not fully understood. There's some hypothesis that it depends on the hydrology of the river, the gradient of streams, the sediment loads that are within the river that host these worms that live in there. So it's really hard to say. But talking with North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, they haven't seen any impacts from it. But they've been positive for a while. West Virginia, I know, has been positive since the 90s.
Well, you said that it was first discovered in 1980 out west.
It was discovered in the 50s and actually in
50s,
Pennsylvania, and it's since spread.
So do you feel like, you say it's not a problem now, do you feel like because this is a relatively new parasite in our stream, that 10, 15, 20 years from now, it might be a different situation?
You know, Colorado's impacts were nearly immediate. It got into the system in the late 80s, and by just a year or so, natural reproduction of rainbow trout was completely wiped out. So I think that the mechanisms that would be in place that would cause it to cause population level impacts would probably already be there. So they've actually, Colorado has seen some, over time, some development of disease-resistant rainbow trout within those populations. So it didn't completely wipe the rainbow trout out, but it did wipe majority of the population. But
Chairman Cook?
Quick question. You mentioned the cleaning stations. Is there a solution that's used?
within the cleaning stations, it's a Vericon, and I'm terrible at chemistry. I don't know the components of it. But also when I worked out west, and what we're recommending to anglers is just using a mild bleach solution. You can soak your waders, your boots in a mild bleach solution for 10 minutes, and then after you pull it out, make sure you wash it off with tap water, because it can be rough on gear, and that will kill the parasite.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Chairman Cook?
Thank you, Chairman Woodson. I'd like to recognize Chairman Sanders for the Budget Committee.
I'd like to recognize Colonel Darren Ryder.
Who I got stiff. I'm getting old is what the problem is. Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. This budget request here is for, this is going to be for $168,800 for the CWD storage procedures that y'all have seen for the last few months that we worked so laboriously hard on to get all this information. So I'm just presenting it today. Cape's the one who did all the research and all the fact gathering and all the bid process and all that go with it. So he's done all the work. These monies are going to be utilized for the procurement of 8 walk-in freezers, and it'll be a freezer in each law enforcement district throughout the state. And we showed a map to y'all last month. Each freezer is of 12 by 12 size with 7.5 foot tall. They'll be sitting on a concrete pad, and each freezer will be equipped with a backup generator. And of course, these freezers are dedicated for the storage of cervid carcasses that are illegally imported into Tennessee, trying to build that infrastructure to get us in the best place we can. And what's important here is this money is going to be eligible for 75% federal reimbursement dollars out of the Wildlife Restoration Fund. So I'll take any questions.
So just to make sure, the expansion's 168, but only 25% of that is the responsibility of the agency?
My Tennessee Tech math tells me that is. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I went to Tech too, so we'll see if we come to the same thing.
How about 42-2?
All right, thank you. Are any questions from the committee? Mr. Swan.
How about the body bags for the deer?
Yes, we talked about that. That's going to be a reoccurring cost. So our plans are come July 1 under new budget, the recurring cost for the maintenance of these freezers and the electric bill for these freezers and the body bags. We'll get those in July underneath new monies.
Do you think those body bags can be reused?
That's not the intent, no, sir.
Okay, so it's a one-time use then?
Yes, sir.
Any other questions from the committee? Chairman Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a shout out, not to you, Darren.
Yeah,
but anyway, just to the agency and this commission. You look around and Tennessee is really being seen as a leader in CWD prevention and our proactive status that we're in. National Wildlife Society and Cornell have all recognized us, brought us out, but that's a shout out to this commission. Chairman Cook, in my opinion, a big shout out to you. You've been battling, this has been on your screen for 2 years now, and you and Chairman Woodson started this fight. And I don't know, just want to give you guys a pat on the back for the job well done.
It's a group effort. Don't blame me for this.
Or any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders.
I know we're running against time, but I was told until I relinquished the microphone, it was mine. So you have those pictures ready. I know since I've been on the commission just a year now, a lot of times we approve things up here that we never really see the results of. I had the opportunity to go out to the pier that we put up some money to go with some money that was raised privately, and we're going to try to show some pictures here. I do not have the finished ones. But these were really, it was really a good time. Had a good time getting out there to meet the people doing the work. This was a last minute addition, so we're having some technical issues. All right, and being the ham that I am, I had to make sure and get in the picture with these guys, so that's the only one I'm in, so go ahead. You can just scroll through those. What this was, I didn't even realize they were doing this. This is the actual fishing pier. They replaced all of those caps all through that. You can just keep scrolling, it'll be fine. And so this is where people in wheelchairs can fish. These are just some of the examples of the boards. So this pier was actually not that old. But you can see some of the damage, and the damage is mainly from sun, not the weather and things, rain and things. It's just mainly the sun. But these guys that are doing the work, this is some of the boards they removed. The money that we provided, and it's my understanding they're actually going to see if they can get some more money. They're going to get us a proposal to actually finish it up, paint it, and do several things to hopefully preserve this. But these guys are all apprenticed at the sheet metal workers, and I gave them a hard time that I told them I didn't see any metal out here at all. But they were really great guys, and they were working hard. And one thing I would say to my fellow commissioners is there are these programs and these people around all over the state, and if there are other opportunities where things can be done. And I love to see the public and private partnership, our money, their money, and so it was really a pretty good deal. Now this is the courtesy pier that I referred to trying to use right after a double knee replacement. This is the one that they're replacing. The guy in the yellow shirt, these are all UAW guys who work at Volkswagen. And the guy in the yellow shirt is the reason there are no video here. He was a very colorful person as he was holding that stake while they were pounding a sledgehammer. It was quite humorous. The other thing, this pier is a composite pier, so it's going to last for a long time. It was really extremely nice from the way it is. And you'll see this is the metal ramp. This thing is going to extend 100 feet out into the water, so it'll be usable year-round. And the only thing I want to point out here, the gentleman in I guess that's a green shirt, and for those of you who don't know, I'm very color deficient. I don't use this launching area very much, and you can keep going. I think there's a couple more pictures. I don't use this launching area much because I live on the other side of the river. And this ramp is extremely busy. And so I made the comment, I said, look at all these people putting their boats in and nobody's offering to help. The guy in the green shirt there was actually a guy that was fishing. And he parked his boat, tied it up, and got off and worked for about 6 hours. He said, I use this occasionally, and this will benefit my family as well. He had nothing to do with the Union Sportsman Alliance or anything else. He just decided to park his boat and help out that day. So shout out to him. I never got to meet him. He was very busy the whole time. So I will get us some pictures of the actual finished pier, but it was a tremendously impressive project to see these people raise the money, bring the team to do the work, and then to get the work done. So just wanted to let everybody know. And with that, I'll relinquish the microphone.
Great, appreciate the story. It's great to see what the results of what we all do here. So thank you. And all right, and finally, we're the last. I'd like to recognize Chairman Cox for the Retention and Recruitment Committee.
I thought we were going to do that tomorrow.
Well,
we're going to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay, Robin? I think so.
It moved along a lot quicker than I thought.
Okay. That's right, I wasn't ready, so I wouldn't be doing it tomorrow.
Thank you. Last year I came and gave, I guess, a little talk about an event that we're going to be having this October 5th and 6th called Wild by Nature. And it's a 2-day event that's going to be held at the Hermitage Hotel, and it's going to benefit the Wildlife Diversity Program unless the sponsors dedicate their donations, and then it can go to whatever they want within the department. So it's a true fundraiser. It's an elegant weekend where sponsors and individuals alike can come have a good time and feel good about what they're doing. The event includes excursions led by wildlife experts that share their knowledge as they go out on trips up to places like the Cumberland River, where they can kayak or visit the Cumberland River Aquatic Center. They can do turkey trapping on a local WMA, bird watching, fishing trip, and even shooting sports at the Barrett factory with a chance to shoot their 50 cows, just to name a few. There will also be less strenuous trips for people if they want it. We did a save the date card, and I've got plenty of those if anybody wants them. They were sent out to different people. We sent them out to our Heritage Club members and also a lot of other people, and you can use those to hand out. We've negotiated special rates with the Hermitage Hotel. Run a house is $389, junior suites are $529, and executives are $750. And just so you can kind of get a flavor of what the event is, I've got a little video here that is from the Georgia. It was called Weekend for Wildlife, and I worked on that for many, many years. And started out, you know, just raising money, and then at the end, we raised over $1 million a year. So, Paula, you want to? It's real short.
From the majestic bald eagle, whose populations are increasing after decades of decline, to the giant loggerhead sea turtle that nests along our coast, Georgia's wildlife depend on us for their survival. Since 1989, one unique and highly successful fundraiser has generated critical funding to protect and manage these species. Every winter, the Weekend for Wildlife at Sea Island draws hundreds of wildlife enthusiasts to Georgia's coast. They come to learn about the natural world, to experience exciting outdoor adventures, and to raise money for important conservation projects.
Weekend for Wildlife is an opportunity for the department to showcase its finest assets, its people, wildlife, the beautiful Georgia environment. This is an opportunity for all of those individuals, corporate sponsors, friends and families of Georgia to come and experience firsthand what it is that the Department of Natural Resources does.
Held at the 5-star Cloister Resort on Sea Island, Weekend for Wildlife is a 2-day event that raises money for research and conservation of marine mammals, songbirds, reptiles, amphibians, and non-game species. It's a good cause, but it's also a lot of fun. When you participate in Weekend for Wildlife, you go on one-of-a-kind excursions led by knowledgeable wildlife biologists. These outdoor adventures let you explore the wild and beautiful parts of Georgia's coast. The funds raised through this event, along with federal dollars and the sale of wildlife license plates, make it possible for the Department of Natural Resources to continue its vital work.
Weekend for Wildlife is a phenomenal event. It's exciting because Georgia has so much diversity in its natural resources. Whether it's the mountains of the southwest or southeast, it's just an incredible state to live and play. To have our corporate citizens come together with the folks that enjoy these natural resources on this particular weekend are just really phenomenal. The money that is raised at the Weekend for Wildlife that is plowed back into Georgia makes a difference in all the different vast areas that we continue to get better and better and accomplish more things in Georgia. It's exciting to see the excitement of the folks that get here on Thursdays and Friday mornings, and all the people wanting to enjoy and talk about all the different attributes that our state has. It grows about 10 to 15% every single year. The reason it grows is because the reason for being here is the amount of money that people can contribute to a cause they truly care about, a cause that benefits all of Georgia, and particularly those that really understand the environment and the reasons we're doing the things we're doing for the environment.
Until this year, Governor Deal was the first governor to recognize non-game in the budget. So before that, We depended on this event, our wildlife license plate sales, and our income tax checkoff to fund the entire program. And most of the notable animals in this state are the white-tailed deer and the turkey and the things that we like to hunt, quail and doves. But about 95% of the critters in this state are actually non-game, and our agency is charged with protecting and conserving them as well.
Conservation projects for wildlife receive limited state funding. And that's what makes your participation in Weekend for Wildlife more important than ever. By being a part of Weekend for Wildlife, you can help protect Georgia's wild places and the many creatures that live there.
Okay, that just gives you an idea, a little flavor of what the event is going to be like. This year the focus is going to be on learning outside the classroom or environmental education. This can include things like a golden eagle telemetry projects, bat monitoring, amphibian monitoring projects, and projects concerning all other non-game in Tennessee. If designated, the funds can go to individual projects within the TWRA, such as research, shooting sports, or youth programs. So it really offers a little bit for everything, for everybody. They just need to let us know their wishes, and we can you know, put their money where it wants to go. Sponsorship levels come with perks, like if you sponsor at $15,000, you get a room at the Hermitage. If not, you can sponsor at like $10,000 or $5,000. Businesses start at $10,000. And then this year we're going to have a charter club membership, which is just for this first year, which is $2,000 per person, all the way up to $50,000. We're going to have excursions, and some of the excursions that we're going to be doing is, as I mentioned, going to the Nashville Shooting Club. James Stroud has generously donated a tour of his studio for Friday, and we're going to have a boat tour on the Cumberland River, which is going to include some shocking for the participants to go out on. Saturday, kayaking trip on the Harpeth River, and you know, just a lot of other different things. Registration will start July 1 for corporate sponsors. I've got a committee together, and I'd like to have them meet like maybe in like next month sometime, so that we can really kick it off in June. General registration starts at July 15th, registration includes excursions on Friday night receptions, Saturday breakfast, Saturday excursions, a reception on Saturday, and then the black tie optional banquet on Saturday night. And if you'd like to go to the website, you can. It's really got a lot more information on it. It's the TennesseeWildByNature.com.
Any questions of the committee or the commission? I think this got potential to be great. At least Robin did a great job in Georgia, so I expect the same thing here.
Well, I'm excited. Everything's really starting to come together, and we're hoping to get a special guest for Friday night so that everybody will be able to enjoy that and make it really special for the first year.
How did you, and I know you had it down to a science before you left Georgia, but in the first 5 years or 3 years down there, how did you reach out to the corporate community? Did you have to go to them and convince them? Did you send them an invitation and they sent one person? How did you get it started with some of your corporate sponsors?
It's a little bit of all of that. A lot of it was personal contact. Say if someone knew someone in business, you know, they would ask them to come. The governor, we were very fortunate. The governor was always our, I guess, honorary chairperson. His wife chaired the event, and so he would come, and if you sponsored at a certain level, you got to go spend the day with him somewhere. And so that was very important to a lot of people, to have that one-on-one FaceTime with him. So we have not gotten a commitment from the governor yet, but we're hoping to work on that.
Chris Richardson can take care of that.
But if not the governor, then, you know, another special guest that would be important for people to have some face time for, because it's just a mix of, you know, business and pleasure.
Thank you, Robin.
I'd recommend Bill Cox for that important guest.
Thank you, Chairman Cox, and thank you, Robin, for spearheading. Sounds like a great program. Thanks for what you're doing, and looks like we did it. We got through it, so thanks, everyone, and any comments from the commission?
I got a question for Greg Watham. I want to know what you did wrong that Director Carter put you in time out that you came to a commission meeting.
Any other comments? Director Carter? Great. Well, thank y'all. We'll reconvene at 9 a.m. in the morning. Thank you.